Lindsay, and if you don't know who this young lady is, she is Lindsay. She's on our staff. If you came to Epic in the last 3 months for the first time, she was on maternity leave. And so now you know why we were stressed out, why we looked a little overworked. She's going to work the next 3 months while we take maternity, paternity, retirement, I don't know. Hey, for the rest of my time on the stage this morning, I want to address every single person in the room, but I want to speak specifically to a group of you to start with. So if you are a girl or woman among us, would you just stand? I just want to say a few things to you on behalf of our church community. All of you, that's right. Doesn't matter. Just, we got 3 guys clapping in the back, so whatever deadbeat man you're with, I want to tell you from my standpoint, we value you, ladies. We value what you bring to the table. We value how you serve and how you lead in your homes, at your places of work, here in our church and in this city of San Francisco. We could not be the church we are without you. Literally, we wouldn't want to be. It was so boring. And then all the single guys wouldn't come to our church if you weren't here, because that's why they're here, single ladies. And so I just want you to know that we're thrilled that you're here. And here's what I know on a day like today. I know on a day like today, there's a ton of joy as we think about moms, and there's a ton of sorrow. And even in my own heart, mind, and soul, I'm a bit conflicted. Had a chance to celebrate, made what I thought was a great meal for the wife last night. And just to celebrate that, I think she's like the best mom our kids could ever have. And in that same moment, for me to reflect on the reality that my own mom will never get to meet my kids because she died at the age of 46. So even for me, it's not like, oh, I'm this and you're that. It's like, no, within me. And so maybe even within some of you are moms and you're thrilled that you're moms. I celebrate you. Some of you are moms and you're not thrilled that you're a mom, but you can't tell anybody that. I celebrate you too. Some of you struggle with infertility. There's been miscarriages certainly in this community. Some of you love the lady that you call mom and how she raised you and what she taught you. Others of you never got to know your mom. She gave you up maybe right when you were born. There's so many different kinds of things that have happened, but I want you to know wherever you're at, and guys too, like when you think about your moms and the ladies in your life, wherever that sits with you today, I want you to know that you're valued by God. I want you to know that you are valued here at Epic Church and that we could not be the sort of thriving church that we are over the last 5 years if you hadn't have given your best and continue to give your best here at Epic. So guys, as loud as we possibly can, let's thank the ladies. Thank you so much. Have you ever had that experience where you see something powerful coming for you and there's nothing you can do to stop it? Have you ever had that moment? Like maybe your lease is about up and you run into your landlord on the sidewalk, right? And you know if the landlord's got a white envelope and they're smiling at you, it's good news. You know if they're making eye contact with you, it's good news. But if the landlord approaches you on the sidewalk, you know, they just happen to be there coincidentally. They've been watching you come out of your house for the last 3 hours. And the landlord comes up to you on the sidewalk. They won't make eye contact. They're looking at you a little bit awkwardly, and they're like, here, please read this. Preferably not when I'm around. And respond accordingly. You know the rent hike in this envelope is something that's coming for you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. How many of you ladies have had that terrible first date? Really? I've got a man raising his hands. I don't know what to do with that. How many of you ladies... I got you, Chris. How many of you ladies have had that terrible first date, and you know 3 minutes into it, it's terrible? Right? But that's okay. Those of you ladies, I need to know, all ladies, how many of you ladies are like eternal optimists? No matter the situation, optimists. Come on. Guys are looking for it. They're like, oh, she'll even see the good in me. How many of you like eternal pessimists? Anybody that just say, I'm a pessimist? Well, my mentor, literally, he's an eternal pessimist, and he says, Ben, it's great being a pessimist. If life is terrible, you expect it. If it's not, it's awesome, and everything's up from there. And so you have that terrible first date, and you know it's a terrible first date within the first 3 minutes, but you're an optimist, and so you want to figure out, how can I make this thing good for me? And so you're like, okay, we're going to a great restaurant. I'm going to eat everything I want. Secondly, I'm not interested in a second date, so I'm going to completely be myself. Novel idea, lady. Novel idea. Right? And so you go there and you're like, but you know what? After this, I'm going to forget this guy. I'm never going to see him again, and all is well. And so you forget about him by the time you get to the office on Monday. But on Thursday, your direct supervisor says to you, hey, we're going to allow you to meet the new team member for our department. And you're pumped because you've been overworked so that you've had to have terrible dates because you haven't had enough time because of your work to have really good first dates. So you're pumped. You can't wait to share the workload with whoever the new employee is. And so the boss is like, 2 o'clock, meet me in the conference room. You're there. You're ready. You're going to make the best go out of it. And in walks terrible, bad first date. And there's a power coming for you, and it is too late to do anything about it. Have you ever been there where something's coming at you and you can't avoid it, you can't get rid of it, you can't even get out of the way of it? It is coming for you. Almost a month ago, my wife Shauna was at the corner of Castro and 15th. She was on Castro, and 15th is a hill coming down to Castro, and she's at a red light. She's on the way to taking our oldest son to his middle school for the day. Just the same routine, day after day, same red light. She hits every day. But on this particular day, while she's at the red light, she notices a skateboarder coming down the hill. Remember, some things are so powerful, you can't do anything to stop them. But she's like, certainly, even though he seems like he's going crazy fast, certainly he's going to be able to make the turn and continue on to Castro. So he comes, and moments later, she realizes there is no way he's making the turn. And his entire body slams into our minivan. Because that's what you do when you have 4 kids. Like, however cool you don't think it is, it's super practical. And so his body, not the skateboard, just this man's body, slams into our van door, the driver's side door, with such impact that the door won't open. With such impact that the young man had to get a CT scan later on that morning. With such impact that it caused $3,000 worth of damage to the door. They had to get a new door. Literally, we do not have the same door that we had before this happened. And my wife, because she's so amazing, the guy slams into her and she's taking him a meal the next Thursday night. Like, we don't have to follow Jesus all the time, you know what I'm saying? Let him pay up and then we'll decide what he gets to eat. But she tells a story, and she said Elijah, he's just reading a book on the way to school, and she's like, Mom, did someone throw something at us? Yes, son, his body. Can you imagine? Like, he's not a big guy at all. He's in his 20s or early 30s, and his entire body caused $3,000 of damage and put us out of commission with our van for 2 weeks. There's nothing she could do because it was coming, it was super powerful, and she couldn't get out of the way of it. Here's what we all know. We've lived life long enough that things are going to come at us, really powerful things. And it's going to be unavoidable so much of the time. It's going to be a health thing, a work thing, a relationship thing, a death close to us thing. It's going to be something that comes for us. And here's a question that we've got to figure out the answer to. Here's the question. Is it possible to have a power in us that is greater than any power that comes at us? Because to the degree to which you and I can answer that question, or if it's yes or no, it'll determine whether or not your circumstances dictate your confidence for the rest of your life, or if your confidence actually can dictate some of your circumstances in life, or you can have confidence in spite of your circumstances. Could it be possible for there to be a power in us that's greater than any power that could come against us? And that's what I want to talk about today. In the first century Jerusalem landscape, what you've got going on is there is a religious council, and they are the unstoppable force. They are the power that when they come for someone, it's unavoidable. Whatever they say goes. Whatever they decide gets implemented. Whoever they say lives, lives. Whoever they say die, dies. They make all the decisions in this day and age. They interpret the law in any way that suits them, depending on what the situation is and what they could gain from the situation. They are that unstoppable force. So when people saw the council coming at them in the first century, they typically ran. You're like, Ben, I don't know if that's true. Well, let me just give you a little bit of church history that I think you know. Whenever Jesus was arrested and was headed to the cross, how many people stayed around when the council was doing that? It's a terrible zero, but it's zero. No one. Why, Ben? Because when the council determines something, and when they kill your Lord and Savior, when they kill the Messiah, the one you've given the last 3 years of your life to, you don't stick around to see what might happen to you. And so that's what they're doing in this first century. They are that unstoppable force. When they show up, Christians and everyone else are a little bit nervous. But what if there was a force at work in that same moment that was actually more powerful than the religious council? That's what I want to point out today. So if you have a Bible, Acts chapter 5, if you need one to follow along, just lift a hand. We'll get one to you, and it'll also be on the screen. Acts chapter 5, we'll catch up there in just a moment. Keep your hands up so that our hospitality team knows who to hand a Bible to. This is a small gift from us to you. Feel free to keep it. I want you to get a sense of what's happening historically speaking. Because what we want to do today is actually put a stop to the Unstoppable series. I want you to think about what's been happening historically. I'm going to give you one verse to just kind of set the tone for what's taking place in this day. Acts 5:14, you'll see it on the screen. Listen to this description. And more than ever, believers were added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women. More than ever, multitudes of men and women were seeing their sins forgiven by Jesus, were receiving a new identity as the adopted sons and daughters of God. And this was just this crazy thing. Now, how many of you have ever worked at a startup? Just keep your hands up. And 3 weeks in, you're talking about, it was a record day. Anybody? And that's viable, but it's like you're just 3 weeks in, right? It's not hard to beat zero after the first 20 days. Well, the same thing here in this moment. The church is only a couple months old. And they're like, we had more people than ever. Like they had a 20-year history. But what do we know so far that makes this a really profound announcement? We know that in one moment prior, in the early days of the church, that around 3,000 people? Do you remember that story? Like, Ben, no, we don't remember most of what you say. I don't either, so you're totally off the hook. But there was a moment we talked about just a few weeks ago where in one moment, in one day, nearly 3,000 people gave their lives to Christ. And now Luke is telling us this in Acts 5:14, more than ever, which means more than 3,000 in one given day, people were being added, people were seeing their lives transformed and their identities changed for all eternity. And that's what's happening. That's the moment. And you can imagine this thrills the religious council, right? No, it makes them incredibly jealous, so jealous that they put the apostles, those people who Jesus said, hey, I want you to lead the movement forward, they put the apostles in the public prison, but in the middle of the night, an angel of the Lord shows up, breaks them out of prison, and says this to them, I want you to go to the temple and speak the words of life to the people. Now, does anybody know how they ended up in prison? Anybody know how they ended up in prison? Because they were at the temple speaking words of life to the people. So imagine that. You're in prison. You're in prison because the religious council wants you to be done talking about Jesus. An angel of the Lord breaks you out. Good news? Everybody's like, I don't know. I've never been in prison. Depends on what the food's like. Come on! You've been freed from prison. And yet the angel of the Lord says, you're free, but what I want you to do is go do the thing that put you into prison. Like, wait a minute here. I don't know about you. Some of you follow God better than I do, but I'm out of Jerusalem by that time. Wait, I'm going to go back and do the thing that put me here? Is there a point in you coming if this is where I'm going to end up? And so they do. They go straight to the temple and they begin to speak about the death and resurrection of Jesus and how you can have new life in him. And the religious leaders bring them in and they're furious. And they said, listen, we strictly charge you guys not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. And not only did you not do that, you filled the entire city of Jerusalem with your teaching. And then Peter says something. Of course, right? Anybody have a Peter on your team? Anybody in your family? If something's being asked, you're never going to get a word in? Peter does, and here's what Peter says. Hey guys, sorry, but we must obey God rather than men. They're furious. And so something's got to come to a head, and that's what we're going to read in just a moment. You've got these followers of Jesus who used to be crazy afraid. Now they're full of confidence, and they decide that they believe that Jesus' movement is an unstoppable force. They finally have reached that point. Then you've got religious leaders, and they're going to do anything they can to stop it, and something has to give. So stand with me. I want to look at Acts 5:33 through 42, and I just want you to be asking this question. Is there a power in me that's greater than any power that could come against me? And because the disciples, they find the answer finally. And when they discover the answer to that question, it changes everything about what they're willing to endure. Do you remember a time when they ran away? Do you remember a time when they were scared in the upper room? Do you remember a time when Peter denied knowing Jesus? You know why? Because in those moments, they weren't convinced that there was a power in them greater than what they were facing. And if you don't believe there's a power in you greater than anything you can face, then you will lose confidence. You will not follow God's ways. You will not live the life that you've been called to live. But if you become convinced that there's something in you more powerful than whatever powerful thing comes against you, it's a game changer. Let's see if they do that. 33 through 42. When they heard this, that's the religious council, they were enraged and wanted to kill them. Them are the disciples. But a Pharisee in the council named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law held in honor by all the people, stood up and gave orders to put the men outside for a little while. And he said to them, "Men of Israel, take care what you are about to do with these men. For before these days, Theudas rose up, claiming to be somebody, and a number of men, about 400, joined him. He was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and came to nothing. After him, Judas the Galilean rose up in the days of the census and drew away some of the people after him. He too perished, and all who followed him were scattered. So in the present case, I tell you, keep away from these men, and let them alone, for if this plan or this undertaking is of man, it will fail. But if it is of God, you will not be able to overthrow them. You might even be found opposing God." So they took his advice, and when they had called in the apostles, they beat them and charged them not to speak in the name of Jesus, and let them go. Then they left the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for the name. And every day in the temple and from house to house, they did not cease teaching and preaching that the Christ is Jesus. You may be seated. There's a number of things in this encounter that should just make your eyes get a little larger. The moment starts with the religious council enraged, and you can't hide rage, can you? They want to kill the apostles. That's the moment we're in. They've had enough. Jesus finally got to a point where they couldn't let him exist, and so they knocked him off, and they thought that once he left the scene, that would be the end of the movement. In fact, you see the logic in here. And I know every one of us in this room, some of us are like very logical people. Like we have to think everything through. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because the other people are going to judge you, but I'm not. Some of us are crazy logical people, and other people are like, oh no, I believe God's into this. He's in this moment. I'm going for it. And what's cool in this text, you see both, don't you? You see some incredible rationale, some amazing logic displayed by this guy Gamaliel. And isn't it, I mean, if you're the disciples, aren't you glad that this guy's in the room? So Gamaliel, he's like, hold on. And it says he's a Pharisee, teacher of the law, and he has crazy influence. Right? If he was a guy that was a Pharisee, teacher of the law, but sort of a junior guy, and he didn't have much favor with the people, they wouldn't have listened to him. Which brings up this principle that's crucial as you think about life and how we live for God. What is that principle? We never know who or what God might use to propel his movement forward. We never know who or what God might use to propel his movement forward. God is sovereign over the affairs of men and women. He is sovereign over humanity. Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. There is no one, even if they're not on God's side, there is no one who is outside of God's authority. Does that make sense? So God might use your evil boss. He might use whomever and whatever in your life. As you look through the pages of the scriptures, you see historically God has gotten really creative with who and what he's used. Talking donkeys. I mean, so many things. And he's going to use this Gamaliel guy, and he's not a Christian. So he's got no like pro-Jesus interests in this moment. He's just simply using logic in this moment. And he stands up and he says, be careful, or before he says be careful, he tells the disciples to get outside. Have you ever been in that moment where you're in a meeting and they're like, hey, would you step out so we can talk about you? Anybody ever been in that moment? So I serve on our board, obviously, here at Epic, and I'm a part and involved in every discussion and decision except for the ones that involve me specifically. So we get to that point where they're like, hey, Ben, could you step out of the room? And if it's 2 minutes, I'm pretty chill. But when they're going like 20, I'm like, oh, man, they're just deciding severance at this point. What? And some of you are like, amen. And I'm like, what are they going to do? And while you perhaps have been asked to get outside the room in terms of, hey, what's the promotion? Are we going to give them a raise this year? Or even if they're going to fire you or not, but I doubt any of us have been asked to step outside the room so that people can discuss whether or not we're going to stay alive. Anybody, please? I mean, I've heard of the Silicon Valley craziness, but anybody, like they've said, hey, would you step outside so we can see if we want to kill you or not? That's the moment they're in. And they know while they're outside of that group, they know that the group is mad enough to do away with them. They know they are that outraged by the situation. And of course, they have it at the forefront of their mind that they killed Jesus. They're not going to spare us. If they want to kill us, they're going to kill us. And Gamaliel says to the guys, to the council, hey, let's be really careful. He's just using tons of logic. So if you're a logical person, he is using lots of rationale here. He's like, let's be careful. And then he uses a couple of case studies, doesn't he? He was like, there's this one guy named Theudas, and he lets 400 people to follow him. And they followed him. And eventually he was killed, and everyone deserted. And it came to nothing. And then he said, remember also, there's a second case study, Judas the Galilean. Remember him? He didn't get 400 people to follow him, but he got some people to follow him. And then in verse 37, right? And then he drew some of the people after him. He too perished, and all who followed him were scattered. Aren't you glad, if you're the apostles, that Gamaliel is speaking this kind of logic? Here's what Gamaliel's saying. He's basically trying to say, hey, this might be a nuisance to you, but I don't know that we need to kill these guys. There have been other movements that have come and gone, and when the leader died out, so did the movement. And Jesus hasn't been dead that long, and so he's like, hey, let's wait and see. And he says to them in verse 38, in the present case, keep away from these men, leave them alone. For if this plan or this undertaking is of man, it will fail. Let them be. If this is their initiative, if this originates in the heart of some human, it's going to fizzle out. If this plan or if this undertaking is of man, it will fail. So you need to know this morning. Man-made movements all have expiration dates. Man-made movements all have expiration dates. It doesn't matter how many followers there are. It doesn't matter how much momentum it has presently. It doesn't matter the great skill or the incredible charisma of that leader. Man-made movements all have expiration dates. And he says this with logic that causes us to think about our own lives, not just history here, but think about your life. If it is of man, it will ultimately what? Fail. I say ultimately because it could look like it has a ton of success and momentum today. Which means we need to begin asking ourselves, the things that I'm pursuing with my life, the purpose I've assumed for my life, how I do relationships, how my character is it like me-centered? Am I in the middle and everything else sort of spins around me? My marriage spins around me. Oh, I'm glad that I have her as a wife, but she's got to make it about me. My work, it really centers around me. What can I be made? How can I be made much of? How can I get the promotion? How can I work as little as possible and get paid as much as possible? Anybody besides me ever ask? It's about me. You just go, listen, he's just using logic here, but he's right on spot with it. He's like, if this thing is of human origin, at the end of the day, it's going to die out. But then he says what? But if it is of God, what does he say? What's verse 39 say? Come on, kids. But if it is of God, you will not be able to overthrow them. He's like, guys, you need to know something. If this is their own sort of made-up thing, just chill. It's going to fizzle out. But guys, if this thing could be a thing that's a thing of God, I know you think you're the unstoppable force in first century Jerusalem, but if this thing's of God, you're not. If this thing's of God, when push comes to shove, guess who loses? You do. If this thing is of God. And so there's a great question to ask over our lives too when we think about the purpose we've assumed for our lives, how we do relationships, how we do our jobs, how we respond, how we react, what our character is, how we treat people who aren't like us. When we think about those kind of things, are we living an it is of God kind of life, or are we living an it is of me kind of life? Because if it's an it is of you kind of life, and it's all about what you want, it's all about everybody get on board with what you're headed towards and what you want to do with your life and what your ways are and all of that stuff, all bets are off. In fact, they said what? You might even find yourself opposing God. Now, can I tell you how most of us want to play this? Most of us want to go, hey, Ben, isn't there like a middle ground where I can plead the fifth? The more I continue to get into the scriptures, the more I think about my life, it's like, no, Ben, in this moment, when this particular thing, in your marriage right now, and when you're leading the church, you're either living in line and in alignment with what God's way is for that or those things, or you're living it of man. And that's where you're at today. So like we can think about whole life, or we can break it down and compartmentalize your life a little bit if you want to, but in every area. And some things certainly seem more neutral than others, but in every area you can go, hey, is this an of God kind of way that I'm living, or is this an of me kind of way that I'm living? You're like, Ben, but I'm just me. Who else is going to? No, what God wants to do is he wants to put a power in you that not only is greater than any power you might face, he wants to put a power in you that's greater than you. See, today is not about like, hey, let's try hard and live the life God's called us to live. Today is about let God's Spirit in you live the life that he called you to live, and that's the only way you can live it. It's an unstoppable force. The movement of Jesus will never be extinguished. Ever. So if I told you today, hey, I've got a stock, it always wins, it has no chance of going bankrupt, pays great dividends, you'd be foolish to not go, I'm in. So when it comes to your life, that's how you need to think about how you're investing your time, your money, your energy, all of those things. You need, like, am I investing in a way that, no, it is of God because I know that that's the way that this thing propels forward and that's the way this thing succeeds, at least in the end. So when you think about your life, is it about you or is it about him? Your way, his way. Are you demanding that he surrender and bless what you want to do, or are you surrendering to what he wants to bless? We need to think through those things. So they sort of take Gamaliel's advice, right? The text says they took his advice, but I didn't see any advice about beating them. And when it says that the apostles were beaten, what it likely means, from all of the commentaries I've looked at, it probably means 39 lashes for every one of them. 39 lashes, not like a little punch and then, hey, go, you're free. 39 lashes that would have ripped skin apart. And that's a little bit crazy to take in, isn't it? That they would be so convinced that the movement of Jesus was unstoppable that they would endure anything it took to propel it forward. But the thing that should blow our minds is the two super counterintuitive responses. So they get beaten, 39 lashes. Just picture yourself in that moment. That, like, it's a scene. For us, it's not a scene. There's a certain kind of breathing you hear in that moment. There's a certain kind of, is my turn next or am I going first, that you see in the eyes of the apostles in that moment. There's the joy the council has in being the ones who are beating them in that moment. That's the moment you need to see. And when they're beaten, they do two crazy responses. The first response is they rejoice. No one's like, Ben, that makes sense. They get beaten and they're like rejoicing. Why? Because they finally reached a point in their faith that they believe living for Christ is better than walking away from something that's powerful. They were afraid and locked in a room before, not this time. They're rejoicing. You know what the second counterintuitive response is? They go right back to preaching and teaching. They do not cease teaching and preaching that Jesus is the Christ, which means what? It means they didn't wait till their wounds were healed before they got back in the game. Hey, Ben, that's crazy. Explain it to me. I can't, other than to say this. They became completely convinced that Christ in them was greater than anything that would come against them. And to the degree that you come to that conclusion, your confidence will be sky high even when your circumstances are down low. That's what Jesus has come to do. Can't we just be honest and say, hey, all of us are happy when things are amazing? Right? And all of us know how to be devastated when things aren't great? But the difference maker is believing that Christ is in us and that he's greater than anything we face. I believe in 1 John 4:4, John just writes that greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. Is he in you, and do you believe with confidence that that power exists in you? Can you imagine if that Jerusalem council walked in the room this morning? They'd be a little bit frustrated, wouldn't they? Like, oh man, it didn't work. I guess this thing got outside of Jerusalem even. So much so that hundreds of people would gather in a downtown basement in San Francisco, people from over 50 different nations. And they would understand that a couple thousand years later, the movement is still healthy. The movement is still winning. And even when it looks like it's falling out, we can have confidence. Some of us are like, oh, Ben, I don't know if the political thing happens this fall. I'm going to... Listen, for those of you that have promised to move to Panama, pastor's looking for a couple weeks of vacation, okay? You're going to be okay. Like, but Ben, I don't know. Can God still get what he wants done if is in office? Oftentimes, God's work gets accomplished the most when we find ourselves at a place of desperation. So whatever it looks like in your marriage, whatever it looks like with your work situation, whatever it looks like with your health, I want to encourage you to tether your life and your hopes to Christ. And here's what we need to know. 50 years from now, most of us won't still have our careers. Some of you young adults, maybe. 50 years from now, the things that are super important to us today likely won't be that day. 50 years from now, many of us will be dead. Our lives will be over. But do you know what won't be over in 50 years? Or 100 years? Or 1,000 years? The movement of Jesus. Because it's unstoppable. Are you in line with it, or are you trying to oppose it? You're in one of those two places, or at least you're on your way to one of those two places. And could I encourage you, even if faith is a brand new subject for you, could I encourage you to at least explore through logic, if no other way, like we saw in the text today? May God be with you. May he empower you. May your circumstances not dictate this week what you believe is going to be great or terrible about your life. Might you come underneath the foundation of Christ for your life in confidence, believing that he can do whatever it is that you need him to do. He is capable, he's able, and he's for you. Paul said it like this in Romans 8:31, if God is for us, who can be against us? In Psalm 27, I believe it was David who wrote, the Lord is our light and our salvation. Of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And the great faith people of old, we don't envy their lives because they had easy lives. We envy their lives because they found a deep faith that took them through a lot of crazy, raging waters. And that's the kind of faith that Christ invites us to put in him this morning. Would you pray with me? If you've never placed your faith in Christ, I just want to encourage you to consider that this morning. To encourage you to think about what would it look like to see your sins forgiven, to receive an identity as a son or daughter of God, and have the power of God in you, able to overcome anything that you might face. God, I pray that your power would come alive in us. Help us to see clearly what is hazy in our eyes and our hearts right now. God, would you give us the kind of confidence that comes from seeing clearly that you are for us and that you are the unstoppable force in the universe. And yet you've invited us to align our lives with you, and I pray that we would be a group of people who do that without abandon, or with abandon, God. That in our marriages, in our work, in our character, that we would be an it is of God kind of life, well lived. God, in our dark days, we would hold on to hope because of this. In our joyous moments, we would just continue to move forward with you. So I pray that you come and fill this place. Fill our hearts in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you sing?